Most common email question I get is how to get charging into my condo or my apartment building. So we reached out to SDG&E, our contact there, and she provided us with Jonathan Torres, who will talk to us today about a Power Your Drive and the programs that SDG&E is working on, and hopefully can answer some questions with that.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Keith. I'll just start by telling you who I am. I've been with SDG&E for a little over 16 years, and I've been in emerging technologies pretty much the entire time. And as Larry will attest to, I've been in solar for over a decade. And as most people that are into emerging technologies, you tend to be early adopters. So I worked a lot with solar when it was in infancy. And as a result, I started working with a lot of folks who were interested in the novelty of electric vehicles in the mid to late 2000, like 2005 to 2010. As much as I tried to get away from EV, I just couldn't, right? I progressed more and more into EV, and now I'm managing the program for Power Your Drive for apartments, condos, and workplaces, which you guys are more interested in apartments and condos. But underneath it all, I'm still a gearhead, right? I love cars, whether it's the gas users or the electric vehicles. I love cars, just period, right? I'm a fan, and I've owned two electric vehicles. Currently don't have one, but it's because I'm looking to buy an electric vehicle. So I've got the bug as well. But I'll start off by talking to you about the program itself and why the state, because this is money that came from the state has set aside some money for this program. And that is that there are demands on what we need as a community. There's a demand for EV infrastructure, and it's driven by several things. One, we all know that petroleum products are a finite resource, and at some point, before it runs out, it's going to become very scarce and very expensive. And so we have to have another type of way of electrifying our transportation as an option. The other thing is, more recent to all of us, is that it sucks to pay $7 a gallon for gas, right? It really does stink that those people that are not into electric vehicles are paying those exorbitant amount of prices. Now, granted, they've come down, which is great, but we're only one international event from it spiking all the way back up to 7, if not more. And the other thing is that I'm sure you guys are all aware of is that in 2035, the state legislation has indicated that there will be no more new gasoline vehicle cells going forward. And then in 2043, all of them are going to be banned. So we have these immediate needs for the electrification of our transportation, and then we have needs down the road that why we need to do this. Now, when you talk about electrifying our transportation, what you're really talking about, besides purchasing the electric vehicle, is you have to have some place to plug it in. And right now, the penetration rate is about 5%. 5% of all car cells are electric vehicles. And we're already starting to see a need for upgrading our infrastructure. These, I guess, albeit kind of grandiose, underpinnings of we're going to get to no new gas car cells in 2035. I don't know if it's possible, because before we can get to a point where we no longer have gasoline cars available for sale, we have to have the infrastructure already in place. And I'm one of the people that's out there literally working with contractors, working with construction crews, trying to get this infrastructure put into place. It's not cheap. Just to give you just a ballpark figure, just for us, and this is SDG&E in-house, to design infrastructure at a new apartment, a new set of infrastructure at an apartment building or a condominium complex. We're talking just for the design. I haven't even started construction. We're talking about $35,000 to $50,000 just to design it, and then we still have to build it, right? Which is usually about another 50 grand. So before we've even put, a shovel into the ground, we're already tens of thousands of dollars into this type of project. So putting in infrastructure is difficult. And we would all love to have Tesla chargers, right? Level 3 chargers. That's just not possible. The best you're going to do in your apartment complexes or your condominium complexes is going to be level 2. Now within level 2, there's 3 flavors right now today. There's the 7.2 kW charger. Sometimes it's labeled as an 8.3. Then there's a 12.8 and then a 19.2 kW charger. These are very energy intensive. They're difficult to build existing infrastructure to match a 19.2. If you have at an apartment complex, for example, 10 19.2 kW chargers, you're going to need a commercial style transformer to be able to meet that demand. And that's extremely expensive. Just to give you an idea, a 500 kVA transformer, which is the ones that you usually see, they're kind of square and they got fins in the back, they start at $150,000. So we're talking about some very expensive infrastructure. So this program is trying to get away from that. And if you'll notice here, it's talking about a CAN transformer for overhead. And the transformer that I'm talking about is actually going to be one of those small ones that usually has a rounded front to it that you see perhaps in your neighborhood. And these are single phase transformers. They're not 3-phase. And these are much more reasonable in terms of price. And so the program, the way it works is we're going to tie into some infrastructure in the street. Now we put it as a pole here, but it can be a transformer, it can be a handhole, it could be whatever infrastructure SDG&E happens to have in the street. And we're going to tie into that and we're going to drop a transformer. And we're going to eventually put a meter in. And then on this particular option, with the clever use of this arrow here, what we're going to do is SDG&E is going to provide this infrastructure and includes the conduit that leads all the way up to the charger. But we do not include the charger. The charger will be the responsibility of the apartment or condominium association that you're in. You're going to have to front the money and buy it. Now we do offer a rebate on these chargers, but you will still have to come up with the money. And the reason I bring this up is because most apartments and condominium associations, they tend to have a reserve for repairs or whatnot. But tapping into it takes an act of God. And just to give you an idea, and I don't know if ChargePoint did this on purpose, but ChargePoint's prices went up dramatically by over 100% in the past year. So to buy a dual port charger from ChargePoint, the last time I checked was $11,000 for two ports. Now on our program, our minimum is 10. So you would have to buy 5 of them. So out of pocket, you're already $55,000 in the hole for purchasing the chargers. Now we're going to give you a rebate on that, but you still have to front the money. We'll give you the rebate after the project is completed and commissioned. If you mind going to the next slide. The second option, which looks very similar to the first, right? And that's because it is very similar. But you'll notice that this blue section, which is what the utility is in charge of, is smaller. The customer takes over from the meter and builds out the entire infrastructure. So why would you want to do that? Why would you want to build it yourself instead of having SDG&E build it? The reason why you want to build it yourself, and I think it's a better option, is on the previous option, we're going to have to put an easement on your property because we need to have access to everything that we built because we will own it. So a lot of condominium associations, a lot of apartments, they feel that SDG&E is just an extension of Big Brother. They don't want an easement on the property, right? So if you go through option 2, we won't ask for an easement on the property. The other reason why is because SDG&E just doesn't own the panel itself. You would own it under this option. On the previous option, SDG&E would own it, maintain it, build it forever. But in option 2, you would own it. The association, the condominium association or the apartment would own the panel. Why is that significant? Well, all of us here are interested in cleaner air and therefore mitigating the use of electricity as much as we can, because we don't want to use coal or any type of petroleum product. So at one point, you may want to put solar. If fuel cell ever comes around, you want to put fuel cell on there, or you might want to put a battery on here to offset the usage of the charger. If you want to do that, or you think you might want to do that, option 2 is the one you want to use, because you will own the panel and you can modify it. Under option 1, you would never be able to have that option. So that's why I believe option 2 is a better deal. Now, let's say that SDG&E says, yes, go ahead, please.
Would it be possible to do a sub-panel if SDG owns the panel?
Yes. The answer right now is no, though. So a lot of people have that question. So we just got a new tariff, and it's called sub-metering, right? Where we're going to be working off of your existing infrastructure, and then we under a sub-panel we would put in a new meter to do exactly what you're saying. It hasn't gotten off the ground yet. So today the answer is no. Soon the answer will be yes. So yeah, we can move forward. Huh? Yeah, exactly, right. Now let's talk about money. So let's just say that, as I mentioned, our minimum is 10 chargers at a location. Let's just say that, for argument's sake, that each port costs you $20,000, which is not outrageous. So this whole project's going to cost $200,000. SDG&E has a cost not to exceed of $18,000 per project per port. So we have $180,000 worth of money to be able to complete this project. This includes the SDG&E infrastructure portion. So let's just say that this costs $50,000 right here. That means at $18,000 per port, with a $180,000 budget, we have $130,000 to be able to complete this portion of it, including the rebate for the charger itself. And I just said that the whole project costs $200,000. So where does that other $20,000 comes from? From the apartment or the condominium association. And you also have to front the money for it, because we're going to give it to you as a rebate on the back end. So in this scenario, you would have to pay the difference, right? $150,000 up front, and we'll give you $130,000 on the back end. So that gives you an idea of what we're talking about. And this is what I do every day. I'm talking to the homeowners associations, I'm talking to the apartments, the property managers, and this is the sticking point. All right, getting either an association to free up that kind of money, because the reserves just don't have it. And if we're talking about a condominium association that only has 20 units in it, their reserves are not going to be large enough to be able to sustain this kind of project. So that's the crux of the matter. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. We have a third option. If you notice, the arrow here is all blue. And this is for locations that are in underserved communities. And the first question is, what is an underserved community? It's a very complex question. It has to do with school lunches in a community, if half of them are subsidized by the state and or the Fed. It has to do if it's by the census, if it was deemed a community that's underrepresented. Having said that, about 75% of the county fits that description. What parts don't fit it? Well, if you happen to live in La Jolla, that's one reason why this wouldn't work there. La Jolla, Rancho Santa Fe, Fairbanks Ranch, most of the coast, North Coast, is not an underserved community. But almost everything south of the 52 is, almost, including downtown. And in this scenario, SDG&E builds the whole thing out. If the cost exceeds the $18,000 that I mentioned earlier, you have to pony that up, but you're not ponying up anything. The flip side is you are having an easement across the whole thing, and SDG&E is going to be the one that's going to be owning and maintaining the entire infrastructure, from charger to conduit to service panel, meter, transformer, everything, the whole thing, because we own it, we maintain it. So let me get into some of the particulars. What are some of the requirements? For apartments and condos, if it's an apartment, you have to own or lease it, which is no big deal. And there has to be an attestation for 5 years with the program. Now, most people don't have a problem with this, right? Most apartments or condos aren't going anywhere in 5 years. You have to own and maintain the EV chargers if you're using option 1 and 2. Under option 3, we own it, so you don't have to worry about that. I'll get to this one later. If you're option 1 or 3, we're going to have an easement, and then you have to submit what's called a load management plan. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with Flex Your Power. You hear it on the radio, you see it on billboards. Flex Your Power is a organization that works with the California Independent System Operator. There's an agency that looks over that makes sure where is the grid in the state most taxed. And if it happens to be San Diego, you'll hear the public service announcement saying, hey, from the hours of typically 2 to 4, 2 to 6, try to diminish your use as much as possible. If the tax on the grid becomes too great, then we call something that's called a demand response event. And the demand response event at that point is no longer just a carrot, it's a carrot with a stick. That's where the actual charge for the electricity becomes exorbitantly expensive. So if you participate in this program, you have to participate in the load management plan, and that is that if we call a demand response event, you must either A, not charge that day, or B, pay the consequences, quite literally, for using the electricity during that time frame. So those are the requirements for the program. I'll stop there to see if you guys have any questions, and then before I move forward. Go ahead.
Yeah, you see schools and even the Walmarts now have the covered awnings, the cars park underneath, you put the solar panels on the top. Why can't your company provide that and then be able to make the profit off the free sun in time?
Could you just rephrase the question because it's not picking up on the mic?
Oh, okay. The question was, why can't SDG&E subsidize solar canopies that are tied in with EV infrastructure? Believe it or not, the reason why we can't do that is SDG&E is not a traditional, within quotes, a traditional utility. We're just a transportation company, right? So the actual juice is being made by a privately owned, an investor-owned actual generator. And that was part of 2001 deregulation. SDG&E cannot generate electricity. We're not allowed to, right? And so because of that, we can't get into the solar business. I think we would have been really good at it because San Diego is a great place to have solar, but we can't get involved into that business, unfortunately, because of that. Yes, right. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great thing about the canopies. Larry had a question?
Well, you mentioned charge point earlier, and I have a charge point card when
Yeah.
I go to some of the locations. And some of those locations were put together with San Diego Gas and Electric, and I'm wondering who actually owns them, who's in charge of maintaining them? Because when you have these different scenarios, who's going to be in charge of maintaining if something stops working. And
Sure.
I have a specific location. I don't know if you know this location down off of 805, off of Palomar. There's a park and ride there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a Caltrans park right now,
Yeah.
it's MTS.
Yes.
And there's some, it's near Greg Rogers Park.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two charge point DC quick chargers that aren't working. So if this takes more time, and I called them and they say it doesn't belong to them, but they can't tell me who it belongs to. They're both not working.
Okay.
Well, who's going to fix it?
So
these kind of, who's in charge of fixing for these different scenarios?
do you mind backing up one slide? Okay, so what you're referring to is this is the second iteration of the program. Power Your Drive had what we call a 1.0. This is 2.0. So Power Your Drive 1.0 looked exactly like this, the third option, that's only for underserved communities. So any charging station that was built by SDG&E dating back to 2016 to 2018 when the program stopped because it met the goals, they are owned and maintained by SDG&E. So all you have to do is give our call center a call and let them know that something isn't working, and they'll come out and address it.
Even though it says charge point.
Well, okay, so all of the chargers themselves are from ChargePoint. So we entered into a contract with ChargePoint for the original Power Your Drive program. So they're the interface.
Well, and these particular ones, these park and rides, might be a little bit separate program. I think there's 4 of them in the county. So if this is one of those, but later on, I'd like to clarify who's going to get them fixed, because.
I'm not the one who does it. Yeah. So you just have to call the call center and let them know the address or where it's at, and then let them know that they're not working.
But that was strange that ChargePoint wouldn't tell me who's the owner.
Yeah, it's because they actually have nothing to do with it. We're just piggybacking off of them to use their platform, their user interface, because SDG&E doesn't build chargers.
Okay,
So we
I
just
can bring my pen, but later you can give me that contact information.
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
So my apologies, I am not a tech guy.
Yeah.
A good chunk of this is Luddite, and I'm trying to pack tech into, so I like Star Trek, but I don't understand it. The building that I'm in, there's about 70 units. There are only 3 of us that we know of at the moment, me and another EV, and then a plug-in hybrid. We were just looking at, or at least I was just looking at, getting a 110 or a 220/40 outlet to my parking space. So I know the HOA contacted SDG&E, and we're getting this kind of thing. And I can't imagine that we're going to get 60+ owners who don't have EVs to be willing to spend the money. So if what we had in mind was more just as owners got an electric vehicle, running a line to their parking space. And I know that may at some point overload the system. I don't know diddly about that kind of thing. Do you have any idea about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
What I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
so it's actually something that I run into all the time, and it's a very common question that I get. And for example, I was just talking to a homeowners association where they have a carport, and within the carports they have like a little closet for each parking spot, and there's an outlet at every single one of them. And they like to plug in their 120 to charge their vehicles, but if they get more than 2 on the circuit, it pops the breaker and they can't charge, right? And so that's a very common problem, because as I mentioned earlier, charging a vehicle is very energy intensive, and so it's much more than a hairdryer, and a hairdryer can pop your breaker, right?
But
So
I had in mind originally, this is like 4 years ago, running the lines from my meter to my parking space, not coming off of the property or the building's power, but my particular meter.
So here's the problem with that. One is you can't run, and this is not SDG&E, I'm just saying, but you can't run an electrical line over a property line, and that gets very quirky in an apartment association, condo association, because you only own in a condominium the walls on the inside, but not the ones on the outside, right? And so when you start doing that, you actually might be crossing an actual. So you would never be able to get a permit to do it. That's what I'm getting at. But let's say you're fine with it, and you want to run it across. One of the things that very few of us in a residential setting ever really encounter is voltage drop. It's a very real thing that if I run an extension cord for 100 feet, where I put the extension cord, I have 110. But by the time I get down to 150 or 100 feet, I no longer have 110. I'm going to have 90. And so you start running into voltage drop issues. We actually have a rule that's called the 150-foot rule, and that is that at three-phase, not single-phase, at three-phase, you run into voltage drop issues after 150 feet. For single-phase, it becomes even more so. At 100 feet, you're going to have voltage drop issues. So what kind of things do you run into? What kind of issues do you run into? That even when you plug in your car at 100 feet, your car recognizes that you don't have enough voltage and won't allow you to charge. It's trying to protect itself. So those are some of the issues that you run into. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, one solution for apartments, and I just was to my daughter's today, and it's got the, you know, covered parking. If they could give more than 30% to municipal things like apartments and condos, et cetera, because 30% for a lot of, you know, apartment owners isn't enough. But if they could give like 50 or maybe 60% credit and get those things full, it's like he has a plug-in. He could plug in anywhere because he'll have a battery backup probably somewhere. And then every stall, you could have a plug where he could plug in his own charger. But we need to get the infrastructure of all that solar covering all those cars that's not being done right now. That's where the power's gonna come from. That's gonna augment what you guys already provide. And then another question I have, I was just at the the Genesis dealer today. All the dealers now have to put over $1 million worth of EV infrastructure in their own business, like Ford. If you're a Ford dealer, if you want to keep your EVs coming in, you got to put it in. If not, they're not going to send you EVs.
Yeah.
So here's the problem. Is the street infrastructure and the size and the capacity large enough to be able to do all these dealers? Or are we going to be sucking, you know, nothing there? I mean, it's just not going to be enough to provide everybody.
No, we don't have the. That's why I was telling you a little earlier that this goal of you know, no new car sales in 2035 doesn't ring true quite yet, because that's one of the problems. We just don't have the infrastructure today to be able to pull that off. And
That's why solar at all the dealers would be really important. If they could give a bigger incentive for all the dealers to put solar panels, that would augment anything that would you be supplying.
so I don't want to get too into the nitty gritty, but the problem with solar is you have to build the infrastructure to be able to withstand if there's no load, right? So in essence, you have to double it. So we would have to, if you put a huge solar system, we have to put in conduit and that can withstand that solar system with no load. Because if we didn't, then imagine putting all that energy into one small conductor. You're going to fry it. So you run into infrastructure problems even with solar. So there's a big need for infrastructure, and the question that SDG&E wants to know is who's going to pay for it, right? If you're going to pay for it as a homeowner, do I have to tell any of the people here that our rates are already too high? Our rates are already too high. They're the highest, actually, in California.
That's why I recommend if you get solar, do a little bit more than you need, and that's what I did. I took my highest with my hybrid, so when I got my other EV, it's a hybrid and an EV. Right now, I think I'm minus 1,500 kilowatts. I'm ahead of the game, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because that allows for crappy weather, like right now.
To offset it, yeah.
Yeah, to offset
Yeah.
it. So I really believe that we have to be independent at every location to be able to sustain everything we want to do. Because you remember the governor saying, don't charge your EV during the summer. We've got air conditioners and everything going. And that's the laughing stock of the rest of the country. Everybody's using that now because California can't. They get in the cart before the horse. But I think if we get enough solar and then battery backup and then be able to control that energy, then we can work as a marriage with SDG&E.
All right. Any other questions?
I would say, why don't you just kind of roll then, I know you're about halfway or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, well, I'm almost done.
Okay.
Yeah. Do I need us to?
No, I was saying, I don't know if we're interrupting your presentation
No,
too much.
you're okay. No, you're fine.
Okay.
So let's go to the next slide. Okay. And I know it's kind of hard to tell, but what this slide is talking about is actual rebates that we provide for the chargers themselves when you purchase them. And for a level 2 single port, it's $5,000. I know you can't see it. And for a level 2 dual port, it's $7,000. Included in the rebate is a network service rebate and a maintenance rebate. So all of these chargers, when you buy them, you will need to have an internet connection, right? You have to, because since your condominium association or your apartment property manager is purchasing the actual charger, you're going to have to be able to have an internet connection so you can bill the end user, the residents, because they're going to be charging using their credit card. The maintenance rebate is for the insurance policy. The insurance policy is what typically, unfortunately, happens, and that is that someone will eventually back up or go forward too far, and it's going to hit the charger and knock it out of commission. And so the maintenance rebate is for that purpose, so that you can basically get it fixed from the manufacturer. We have up to $5,000 on a dual port for the internet connection, and up to $5,000 for the maintenance, the insurance policy. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Timelines. From the time your association or apartment complex submits their interest to me, I'm the one who manages this, you're looking at about a year and a half for commissioning when it's finally done. So where's the bottleneck occur? Bottleneck occurs not in construction, but actually in design. We have to pull permits. A lot of people think SDG&E is special and that we have some sort of special arrangements with the cities and county, and that we get our permits. No, we get permits just like you do. We go into a line and we get our permits in order to be able to build our infrastructure. And then we have to design it, and so that takes about 6 to 9 months. Now, on top of that, I'm quoting a year and a half because on top of that, we have supply chain issues. Everything that we're trying to get is just taking longer because some component that was made in China, we can't get it. And that's just the reality of things. I've been trying to buy a radiator for my car, and everything is supply chain. So it's not just, it's everything. Everything is just taking longer to get, and the bottleneck is happening right here. Before we get to construction, it's getting all of the stuff together to be able to start building. So we're looking at 6 to 9 months, possibly more. Next slide. One more. All right, last but not least, I want to talk about the rate. So one of the things that a lot of people don't catch as I'm giving the presentation is that your condominium association or the apartment complex that you live in now becomes a third-party biller to the residents, because I'm not billing them, SDG&E is not billing them, you are. And you're going to have a contract with the manufacturer of the charger. So I'm just going to use ChargePoint as an example because they're one of the biggest, right? Or Blink. You, the condominium association, will make a contract with Blink or ChargePoint for the charger, and you guys will come to an agreement on a price for your residents, and your resident will come in and use their credit card or their ChargePoint app, and they'll charge, and then eventually a check is cut from ChargePoint or Blink back to the Condominium Owners Association or the apartment complex. SDG&E is no longer the biller, so that's very different from how the original program was done, where SDG&E was billing the end user. We're now out of that game. We've stepped away, and the way we did it is by making the condominium association or the apartment complex purchase the charger. So we're not billing it. However, as I mentioned, we are dropping a meter in the project. That means that the SDG&E customer is now the condominium association or the apartment complex, and we're billing for the total usage, not the individual usage. So we'll send you guys a bill, your condominium association or your apartment, and ChargePoint or Blink will make you whole on the back end, but you have to choose your prices right. Right? You have to make sure that if you're charging a customer or a resident 50 cents per kilowatt hour, that's enough to cover the usage that we bill you, SDG&E, to the condominium association. So that's the point of this slide here. And then last slide. Thanks, Keith. Is just how much money I have. I have a hair under $48 million to spend on this program. That's the funding that I have. I've been authorized for 2,000 chargers. I put 200 locations here because my minimum is 10, but I have several condominium associations and apartments who are saying that they want to do more than 10. And so as the average goes up per project, the amount of locations drop down because my ultimate goal is 2,000 chargers. 50% of all the projects have to be in an underserved community. That's one of the compliance portions of this. And it says right here $15,000 per port. It's actually $18,000 per port, and I quoted that earlier. I sent Keith an old version of my PowerPoint. So that's everything I have to say regarding the project that I managed. But I do want to talk about, and I think it was you, Larry, that kind of brought this up. So and what was your name? Bill. And one of the things that he brought up, we do have a rate at SDG&E that's, we have 3 electric vehicle rates. We have one that's called EVTOU, EVTOU2, and then EVTOU5. And if you guys are familiar with any of these rates, EVTOU5 is the one that most people use because between midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning, it's about 9 cents per kilowatt hour to charge. However, EVTOU, which doesn't have as nice of a billing structure, does have one advantage, and that is that we will set a meter for you at your place of residence for the exclusive use of charging. So what's the catch? Well, you got to build it. You have to build it, not us. You build it, we'll provide you the meter, and then we'll send you either a combined bill with your current home bill, or we can send it separately to you. It's up to you, however you want to do it. So I did want to bring up that one as an option, but most people kind of flinch when they see how much it is to even put in a 120 outlet. Yeah.
So that's where I was going to ask a question from personal experience, that it actually costs me to pay more for the permits from the city than to get the charger and the electrician to put it in.
Yeah.
Like, is there any way that you're aware of, since we so much talk about underserved communities, is the city offer permit discounts or?
So, and this was something I was talking with Larry about, just to answer your question. There are monies, obviously, like the ones I'm showing you here, there are monies available for multifamily, right? And commercial. That's the other thing that I work on, right? I work on commercial workplaces. And I even have a program for medium duty, for fleet services. But what about the single family homeowner? What about, me? Is really what it comes down to. There is no federal, state, municipal, or utility money for the single family homeowner. And I'm an EV guy too. And I had to pay my electrician to come in and give me $240 and at considerable expense. So, I mean, these are things that unfortunately have been given to us. And Bill, you mentioned earlier that it's kind of hard to get 60 people who do not have an EV to sign up for it. So most of people are coming up with their own solutions and using the EVTOU rate that I was telling you about, because that's the only way you can get it done, but it's on your coin. So you have to come with that money. So it really stinks that there really isn't a resource for the rest of us that's provided either by the Fed, the state, the municipality, or from those agencies that grant permits. There's nothing in terms of discounts or anything like that. At SDG&E for a while, I had rebates on the charger itself. I think it was $50, which is nominal. It's not much. But even that's gone away. So now there's not even, you can't even get rebates on the actual chargers themselves. So yeah, go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, going back to you're putting in 10 locations for a condominium,
Mhm.
and you were explaining it different from Power Drive 1, where you were sending the bill. And I know at some of the locations, you could set it up, well, based on time of day and what was the electricity and the solar yesterday, here's your new rate for today, and people could pick what they wanted to do. So this, and the bill still came from San Diego Gas and Electric.
That's right.
So now you're saying this Power Drive 2,
That's right.
the bill comes from, I'm a little bit confused.
It comes from ChargePoint. So it comes,
ChargePoint's
yeah.
gonna
So if you're
send-
the end user, it comes from ChargePoint, and you're. I mean, think of how you charge today through ChargePoint. You just jump onto your app. It recognizes the charge station.
And they
right?
charge me.
And they charge you,
Right.
right? So that's exactly the scenario that we're talking about.
But they still have to pay SDG&E for the bill that goes to the
Your
meter, right?
association does.
Okay, the bill goes to the
Yes,
association.
the bill goes to the association for the total usage.
And
And so the association is the one who
so
determines the price.
ChargePoint has to pay the condominium,
Yes.
and they keep a little profit somehow.
Well, you have to price it correctly,
Yeah.
right? So
If they price it correctly.
yeah, so the actual rate that we bill the condominium association is on a commercial rate.
Oh, commercial rate.
And
Oh.
so
Is it time of use or how?
it's
is it?
time of use and it has a demand component. And I know most of you are not familiar with demand because that's not how you're billed at your home. But buildings like this one are built on how fast they use electricity in addition to how much electricity they use. And so this will be on a commercial rate, and so it'll have that component built into it. And so that's not how your EV customer is billed. They're just billed per kilowatt hour. So you have to come up with the right number so that you're made whole
Yeah.
as a condominium association, and perhaps a little bit of profit, and not because you're trying to make money, but because you might have to pay for, because once my program is only five years. After that, you're going to have to pay for the network and the maintenance. So you'll have to factor that into your price as well.
And you mentioned time of use 5, was it?
Yeah,
EV5?
EVTOU5, yeah.
But I know that you usually pay a monthly fee.
$16, yes.
And so could they have one meter with time of use 5, but it goes out to 10 people?
No, EVTOU5 is for residential, single
Just
family
residential?
single
okay.
family
So this is
residential.
commercial? okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So with this scenario, is there any plan with the meter that you have, that you're putting in for that condominium association, that if there's a power need, that you'll just turn that meter on?
No, that's why we give you a day ahead a notification via email, and we let you know, hey, tomorrow the price of electricity is going to be exorbitant. You decide what you want to do, and typically that just literally means throwing the main breaker. So that next day, if you don't want to incur any type of charges, you just throw the main breaker. Some of the platforms will allow you to shut it off that way, so you actually shut off at the charging station itself, not at the breaker, but you can do it at the breaker. At the main breaker, just throw it and just let it be for that day, and then the following day you turn it back
No
on.
plan for you guys we need power, we're shutting down.
That's called a rolling blackout. That's what a rolling,
You're not
yeah.
making plans individually?
No, not individually, yeah. Yeah, we do it by circuit. We don't get granular like that. So if it gets that bad, we'll notify you on your bill, you're subject to a blackout this month. And most people read over that, but every month on your bill, there's a little notification that says, this month you're subject to rolling blackout, the following month you won't be, and so forth and so on. You had a question, sir?
Well, I was just trying to clarify, you threw out the word profit there. I think there's two opportunities for profit. One is the condo association or apartment could make a profit if they're charging their 10 EV residents a lot, and the SDG&E bill is smaller, but the homeowner association is actually collecting profit each month.
Yeah.
Because then there's second profit that ChargePoint collects cash from all the cards and users.
So
But then they cut a check to the apartment once a month, so they could keep 5% if we're
10%. The industry average is about 10%. Depending on which provider you have, they go up to 15, but they usually give you something more because of that 5% that they're taking additionally, and they provide an additional service to you. So it just depends on which provider you want to use, just like your cell phone. All right, guys. Well, I've taken enough of your
Very
time.
educational.
Is there anybody online?
Good.
We got a question on.
Yeah, so basically they said with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, you
Yes.
said there was millions and billions of dollars there. In all of that, there's really nothing for condo, apartment, multifamily set aside?
Yeah, you gotta remember that the IRA, as much as we would like to think that it was some sort of gift to the taxpayer, the IRA is really focused on the manufacturers. So the IRA is affecting the manufacturers of the batteries themselves. It's affecting the manufacturers of vehicles more than anything. That's where most of the money is going to. And you and I, as taxpayers, we benefit because of the $7,500 rebate, the Fed rebate that comes through it. So all of these dollars are going to be somehow administered to us through some sort of federal system. So it won't trickle down so much through the state or municipalities. So it's really tied up in a different location, not directly benefiting us individually.
Hey, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is John. I've been listening online, and thank you for being there. Thanks for your presentation. And thanks to Bob and whoever else worked out those audio problems in the beginning. Came through loud and clear, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I was wondering specifically about the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed by Congress last year. That contains a lot of funding for EV charger construction. And I know they were talking about along highways principally, but I was wondering, is any of that funding available to the apartment owners and condo building owners? Like you were saying before, that's going to be an obstacle in getting charging stations built in these places. Is some of that funding available to these owners to pay that cost, pay the cost of maintaining, installing, buying the charging stations?
So the short answer is not really. It's earmarked for the state, and then the state gets to determine how it gets divvied up. So the Fed just says it has to be earmarked to help out, you and me, the Joe America. But the state is the one who determines how that money is going to get divvied out. And most of the money, and this is just from what I'm seeing on what I'm seeing at the PUC and at the commission, what we're seeing is that this will probably be the last iteration of this program, and the Fed wants the utilities out of it. They don't want us administering the monies. They don't want us doing anything with the money. What they want is to have a more direct communication through the state. So the state ultimately will have the power of how these monies get divvied up. And you're right. This went through last year, but I haven't seen it on our end. I know that a lot of that money did go to infrastructure, but it also went to like the EVHIP program, which is the vouchers for the medium duty fleet vehicles, and that's where a lot of the money got tied into. So again, as I mentioned earlier, most of that money did not come to us, you and me, directly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
You talked about the huge demand that you see in the future. What is SDG&E doing to create that electricity? What do you anticipate in the future? Are you going to build a bunch of gas-fired?
So has this ever happened before? Absolutely, right? At the turn of the century, all of a sudden, the need for electricity just went through the roof as people bought the refrigerators and air conditioning units, right? We're basically looking at that type of revolution again. What had to happen at the turn of the century leading all the way up into the 50s? Monstrous amounts of capital projects, dams, things of that nature were built to satisfy this demand. That's what's going to need to happen in the future. It's going to be massive. I mean, we're going to have these construction projects that are going to are going to affect the corridors. And if you haven't ever seen it, our main corridor here in San Diego is Mission Valley. That's where all the power comes in from Arizona and from Nevada. And we're going to have to upgrade most of that type of infrastructure. So it's going to affect us all one way or another. But that's the type of level of infrastructure upgrades we're going to have to see. It's going to be cumbersome, bothersome for potentially decades as construction tries to catch up with the demand that we have today that we can't meet.
And are you going to be buying SDG&E buys? So you're not actually building gas-powered plants?
No. We're beefing it up, right? What you don't see. Yeah, what you don't see, because it's all mostly underground, especially like in this area, is that you have like huge conduit that has multiple conductors coming through, right? We're going to end up having to put another conduit and maybe another one and maybe another one. So to be able to feed this increased demand for electricity. So we're going to use the existing corridors, but we're just going to have to beef it up. That's what's coming.
But I think there's also a lot of potential for distributed energy, solar with battery backup on a local level to help support. And they say EVs are going to crash the grid, but I think with bidirectional charging, there's a huge potential to put energy back in during the peak times and help the grid. So we have to work on all that technology.
And that's the reason why our rate is built the way it's built. EV2OU5 is giving you that 9 cent per kilowatt hour charge between midnight and 6 because who's up? The great majority of us are sleeping, right? That's when we want you to use the infrastructure that we currently have so that you're not doing it at between 4 and 9 when you get home from work, when most people get home from work. So we're trying to incentivize everybody here to charge between midnight and 6 because that's when demand drops down, it's at its cheapest. And so that's why the rates are built the way they're built.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bob's got a question?
I've got a question. Can you explain why it takes 9 months for each one of these plans? Because I would think a lot of these are almost a cookie cutter. Like you can get a permit for a retaining wall because 90% of it's just a duplicate of what's been done before. How different is each apartment that you need 9 months to account for the differences?
So I'll give you an example of what is different. A lot of these condominium complexes were built in the 70s, right? Most of them, 70s, 80s, and we have single-phase power feeding these. So we have to bring in 3-phase power in some cases, or we have to install more single-phase power. So each project is unique in its scope of work. Sometimes, you don't realize it, but you may have an easement running through a property. And it might be, a dry creek bed that's on a 100-year plain. And so that involves environmental impact studies. So every single one has very unique challenges into how we build the infrastructure. You're right. You would think all we'd have to do is, okay, we got power right there, hook that bad boy up, here's a charger, and go at it. But there's always, invariably, there's always something unique on every single project that I'll give you another example. I'm currently working on a project in Rancho Peñasquitos where we were looking at it the whole time on Google Maps and they look like a winner, right? We get there and we look up and we got transmission lines going over the top, and transmission lines are federal. We can't touch them, so we had to move the infrastructure to another location. So these are things that you run into all the time. Every single site, it always presents some challenge and is unique.
And then just one last thing. I mean, I think SDG does a great job with your website. Most electric car stuff is just drive electric.
Yeah.
SDG&E/drive electric. So if you ever want to go to their website, or even when you call, I've done it before. You get on the phone, the person answers, and you go, "Hey, send me over to the drive electric people." And that's usually. Yeah. I know there used to be 4 in your department. I think it's probably much bigger now.
Yeah.
But they'll route you over there a lot quicker. But Larry, I've had similar issues with charging at a college site.
Yeah.
So it's.
And then I gave Keith this presentation. You're more than welcome to share it with everybody here. My personal contact information is not on there, The CT programs, which is Clean Transportation Programs at SDG&E, email is there, and that does get to me. So if you guys ever want to reach out to me with a personal question, well, not personal to me, right, but something personal to you, feel free to send me an email. I'll be more than happy to address that for you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.